Tommy's.
Great. And welcome back to the Rachel and Tommy show. So today we're going to just interview each other.
Yeah.
Where we got started, how we got into real estate, who are we, and why are we watching? So Tommy, born and raised in...
Here. Yeah, so I was actually born in Mobile, but...
Alabama. We're in South Alabama.
Yes, I forget that. I got to tell.
Yes.
But grew up in Gulf Shores. I moved there when my dad... Well, I was probably 1.5. My dad was a custom home builder, and
in Alabama.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Oh.
So my parents are both from Monroeville, Alabama.
Yes.
To Kill a Mockingbird, you know that whole.
Yes.
So they're both from Monroeville. My dad was a custom home builder in Monroeville, and then he moved to Montgomery, and he did a lot of work at the Capitol, like restoring some of those buildings.
Never knew that.
And then it was the 80s, so it was weird. So it drove him back to Monroeville, but Monroeville was kind of a dying market.
Yeah.
And so they were losing their industry, and so there was no opportunities really there for him. So he had a client that was from Monroeville building a house on Ono, and that was only like
Island.
2 houses on Ono then back then.
Yeah.
It's old Ono,
Yes.
Now it's like baller Ono.
Ono's like a gated community, islands,
very exclusive,
millionaires.
Yeah, high-end prices. So he built his first custom home there. And then I don't really know the timeline or what happened, but basically he was working on a neighborhood that they're packaging together with Adams Homes, and it was taking a lot longer to get this specific type of, they weren't zero lot line, but it was going to be something like that, and they hadn't had that here, and so it took the city of Foley a long time for the planning and zoning to approve it. So in the meantime, it was like a 6-month waiting period.
And were you born at this time?
I was born. I was here.
And he was living in...
Here. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of funny because he moved here first before we all came.
In what year?
86.
So he
87.
moved here and the family's still in Monroeville.
In Monroeville. Mm-hmm. My mom was a teacher. My grandparents were there, so she kind of had like
Mom
a whole
was a
support.
teacher at a school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when we moved here, we actually, I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. And then my grandparents, my grandfather was an investor. He was a principal.
In real estate?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was a principal at a high school, and then he was a superintendent, and then he went and worked for the state of Alabama Board of Education. And so that his family moved to Montgomery, and then they moved back to Monroeville, where he was the head of, it's now Coastal Community College, but back then it was Patrick Henry Community College. So he was like the president of that or whatever.
And he like bought like real estate investment.
So he was, in the meantime, he was like, he was buying condos down here. Yeah.
Condos.
Yeah.
Oh, imagine you held on to those condos nowadays.
I know. So like they had a whole portfolio for a while. And when he got sick and passed away, before he passed away, there was like 1 condo for each of my mother's children.
Love that.
And then my grandmother was like, I'm not going to give any of you, I'm going to spend it.
That's how my mom's parents
she sold most of the condos. She kept some of them for a little while, but the best one she had was at the Surf and Racket Club in Gulf Shores. And they bought it in 85, I think.
Imagine you would have kept all that.
And it was a foreclosure, and they paid $15,000 or $30,000 for it. Yeah. And then we sold it before COVID for like $280,000 or $300,000, something like that. But now it's like $400,000 or $500,000. Yeah.
So your dad got his real estate license what year?
Like 86 or 87, I
think. And then he worked for...
84. So he originally worked for Bob Malone and, Frank's dad, Malone.
And they had their own brokerage.
Yes, they were, I think they were eraclass.com then. Okay. Was the name of their company.
And then your dad stayed there until he opened up his own.
So my grandmother is a realtor as well.
So and that's the first generation. Yes. So you're the third generation realtor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she was always encouraging him, you got the personality, you need to get into real estate. And then he was trying to get in with Bob Malone. They were developing that together.
Yeah.
And Bob said, you should get your real estate license. I think, all right, maybe he already had it then. He was like, you should hang your license and just sell some real estate. Yeah. And he said he sold his first house, and he's like, I'm never going back to custom home building. Yeah. Because he would always say, custom home building is womb to tomb. You're with that client for if the floors creak, they're calling you.
Me,
yes. If it leaks, they're calling you.
I know.
And so he sold his first house, never looked back, and he's been successful all these years and been.
And your mom was still teaching, so he got his real estate license. He's buying and selling.
They actually got their license together.
Okay,
but mom never did it. She never did anything. She was a teacher,
and that's still...
She taught English growing up, and then she became an assistant principal, and then she opened a Christian school, and so it was always education.
Yes.
And finally, my dad was like, "Look, we're paying all this money all these years for your license. Like, either get in it or get out." And she was like, "Okay, I think I'll get in it." And then she stepped in and started selling, and she opened the real estate school, and so
which works good for her and her
so
passion.
she actually, I think she let her license lapse because I went to college at Troy University in Alabama, Troy, Alabama.
Yep.
And
Alabama.
actually, growing up, my whole life, I was like, I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to be famous and I'm going to be a big Broadway star, whatever it is. I don't know.
I could see you doing that.
Yeah. I was big into theater and music.
I literally can see you doing that.
Yeah. And so, but I also spent a lot of time growing up. I would go every summer and volunteer at a deaf school in Mexico. And so I would work down there and we were like building the school and doing like manual labor and like.
While you were in college.
Yeah. I did it through high school and then I did it in college. I think I did it 5 summers in a row.
So were you like, real estate's not for me at that point? Because you watched your parents.
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
You've probably seen it's not
I'm never
easy.
going back to Gulf Shores.
Yes,
you
you leave, you're never coming back. Yeah.
So I had no plan when I graduated high school.
Ever to have. No.
Yeah, and I had no plan. Like when I graduated high school, it was like my parents bought me a nice truck and I came home and then I was kind of like panicked because all my friends were going off.
It's the hardest phase. I think that was the hardest phase of life is graduating high school, college. What am I going to be when I grow up?
So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My mom was like, well, I do. I signed you up at school. You're going to Troy.
Yeah.
Like I called them. And honestly, like I never cared about school or never cared about grades. I was always like just C average student. Yeah, like it was whatever. I probably could have done really well had I applied myself and really understood like the whole game, but I didn't. And I wasn't interested in that.
Yes.
I was going to be famous. I didn't need school, like it was, that was my whole vitality, And so I was like, okay, I'll go to school at Troy. And you want me to have a degree? You're paying for it. I mean, they were paying for it. I was very fortunate that I have no student loans or anything.
I know. That's something.
So I was like, I'm going to have fun. So I did. So anyway, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, 3D studio, ceramics, and sculpture, and then a minor in graphic design.
So that's what you graduated with.
That's what I graduated with.
And then your first job out of college was?
Real estate. So it was like.
I know. It's the weirdest thing.
I know. So, what's funny, if I could back up, like I grew up, like money was like kind of readily available when I was growing up, and I didn't really understand the concept of money.
Yes.
And I think even in this business, you don't, because we work with such large numbers.
And things are coming and going every day.
Yeah. That sometimes you just take for granted, like $1,000 is $1,000, and you're like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense or resonates.
No, that makes sense the way you say that, because like $1,000 to someone's like $1,000, but to us it's like we deal with like hundreds of thousands of dollars a day.
Yeah, millions of dollars.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, if we're being honest. So I went to college in 2005, and the market here in Gulf Shores, Alabama tanked at that time. It was like 2006. My dad had 5 brokerages at that time, and we had over 370 agents.
All exit. They were. Your dad started with exit, always exit franchise.
No. So he was with Bob Malone, and then he was selling all Ono mostly at that time, and they weren't. They were selling a lot of Foley properties, and like not that it didn't really. Gulf Shores is different now than it was then, and so they weren't selling the caliber of home that he was, and he couldn't get help. And so he and another person went to another company that's all they sold was Ono Island.
Okay.
And then he was like, well, I don't want to just sell Ono. He was helping sell a lot of the condos and pre-development and things like that. So somewhere along the line, I think he ended up with Realty Executives, and that was when Anthony Kaiser owned it at the time, and he was Anthony's broker, and he was there for X amount of years. I don't know how many years, and then he opened his own company, which was Paradise Properties, and it was in Foley. It's where Maloof is. That was the building. Just like a and then he found a partner that was a developer, and like it just, and so he and the partner were looking for more, and then he went to an NAR conference, and they had a booth, and he kept going back. That's the dumbest name, Exit. I don't get it. And then he was like, they would connect the dots for him, and they're like, what would Coca-Cola pay to be above every corporate door in America?
Yeah.
It's like free advertising, Exit, safe passage, Exit. So that's how that happened. So back then he grew really fast. He was the first one in the state and the first one in this area, and so he was just buying franchises left and right. And my dad is like a super trusting and loving person, and I've seen him get screwed year after, so many years in the past, people that just take advantage of that kind of.
I know. So that's why it is funny you got into real estate, because I asked my kids now, like I asked Bryce, my oldest, I was like, are you going to get in real estate? Literally his answer was to me, no, I want a life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the fact that a child could pick up on it.
But
so it's
also,
funny, you grew up in it, and then you're like, I still want to be in real estate.
I know. Well, and it just kind of happened because I was at a pivotal point. Like Grace and I dated for 5 years
in college. So you met her in college.
We both met at college our freshman year, like the first week. I mean, honestly, and we dated throughout. So I was always like, I'm not marrying you because as soon as I marry you in college, like I'm cut off and I'm on my own, you know? But like going back, like the economy stopped in 05, 06.
Yep.
And so like my parents would give me a budget. Like, here's your, I didn't know how to budget money. I didn't know anything about money.
I know.
And I'd be like, hey, I'm out of my money. And they'd be like, oh, okay, well, we don't have any. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have any? They're like, we don't have any money to send you.
Because the market crashed.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, what? They're like, go get a job. And I'm like, what?
How do you spell that?
I had a $60,000 truck that I couldn't even afford to put the gas in. Like, I mean,
did you get a job?
Yeah, so I went and got a job. So my first job in college was at Guthrie's.
Okay.
So my sister had gotten a job because she was in a sorority and she had to keep paying for the sorority.
So she was in the same college with you?
So she got, yes. So my sister, my brother, and I all went to Troy.
Wow.
My oldest sister went to Southern Miss.
Okay.
So it just kind of happened. My brother actually went to a private school in Montgomery to start with to play baseball, and then he ended up transferring when my sister went because she was a cheerleader at school and all. Anyway, so she got me the job at this place, and it was disgusting. Like when I went in, like you would not imagine.
Because that's a fast food place.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
it's like a fried chicken.
Yeah.
And it just opened too. And when I went in, it was like probably 5 inches of grease, like on the ground, like in the back, and there was like roaches. And anyway, so like I didn't even worry about learning how to cook or anything. I was cleaning. I cleaned that MFer like from top to bottom, that whole day, like,
my God.
And anyway, so like within a month I was promoted to an assistant manager, like, and I do feel like I've always kind of been like that. Like, I mean, I may not have had a job and things, but I've always known like if I got to get somewhere, I've got to do it. Like nobody's going to bail me out or help me,
Exactly.
And then from there, actually, I got a really great job, and I thought I was so rich in college. It was a government job, and it was teaching abstinence to these local high schools. I got it by fluke. I don't even know how I got it. I knew a friend of a friend that, anyway, it was the best job I ever had. We would go into the classrooms and we would teach kids about not having sex and like about how they could get diseases.
Never knew that.
Anyway, it paid like $25 an hour plus mileage. And so I'd like, rolling in the dough back then. I thought, I know. So long story short, we graduated college and I really didn't know where I was going to go. It was like either Grace and I are going to stay together and get married.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go off and get my master's and still not know what I want to do. But if I get my master's, I'm on my own. And so I'm going to have to start paying for that myself, And so I was looking at SCAD, like in Savannah. It's that Savannah, whatever, design school. Yep. And then my dad at the time, they went from like no sales to he got a contract with Fannie Mae selling foreclosures.
Yes, that's when
he was like the only
in
one.
Like, was it 08 or 09?
That would have been 2010.
10?
I think he had just started like maybe in the fall of 09.
Okay.
But it's a ton of paperwork.
I know, but that's when I first moved here. All those foreclosures.
Mm-hmm.
That was
so he got it by chance.
Those real estate agents made a killing.
But you know what's funny though? Like, I mean, they did it because it paid the bills.
Of course.
But like compared to now,
it's nice. Yeah.
Like my dad was the number one. The price point's so different. Like I remember like looking at stats. He was the number one agent that year in 2010 or 2011, and I think it was like 16 million total volume. We're like the number one agent right now is like 100 million.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's such a difference in price point that quickly. So anyway, it was a ton of paperwork, and he really couldn't keep up.
Checking on the property, changing the locks, winterizing.
Listen,
it's
and
a lot.
I learned how to change locks because they would pay us $150. I'd go be my own locksmith, change the lock.
It was a lot. It is a lot.
So I came to be his assistant to start with, and so I was an unlicensed assistant for the first probably 6 months that I was in real estate in 2010, and then I got my license in 2011.
And Grace moved here too with you out of college.
Yeah, she moved here. We graduated in May. I think she was doing something in the summer, and then we ended up moving together. My parents had a farm that they purchased before the economy tanked. They were going to redo and like make a whole subdivision that didn't take off, but they redid the house. And so she was in one bedroom, I was in another. You had to say that in the South, like we did not cohabitate, like we were in separate rooms.
So different growing up in New York.
Yeah, we did not share a bed or share a bedroom.
Was that like the rule your parents said, or you?
Oh yeah, and that was like understood too, like. And we both grew up very Christian, and
and that is the difference. Living here now,
just to say like we lived under the same roof, people are like, oh.
I know, because I was thinking the other day, I was like, literally, churches in the South are like Starbucks in New York. They're like literally on every corner. And I said to myself the other day, I was like, this is so, because I was driving around on a Sunday, there was church,
everywhere.
It was so busy. So did you do that though? You slept in some? Did you actually?
Oh yeah,
actually did it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
All
And
right.
so no hanky panky before marriage. Yeah.
You didn't do it before.
Yeah. So we had
Tell
separate rooms.
me.
Yeah. Separate rooms, everything. So, and
That
then,
is freaking amazing.
yeah. In
Wow.
August, I proposed. And I saved up every penny I had, that I had made that summer working with the foreclosures. And I went into a jeweler here, and he helped design the ring. And, it was a sweet moment. I paid for it with cash. I was so excited.
So cute.
And so then we got married in October. So it was like pretty quick
Of
timeline.
2010. 10.
So August engaged, 2010 married.
Wow.
We bought our first house, right? Like we closed the day before our wedding.
Yes.
And it was the best deal. It was a foreclosure in Alberta. It was a 1,900 square feet on 2 lots, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and we bought it for $74,000.
That's awesome.
Our payment was like $500, and I was so stressed about making $500 payment.
Listen, when you first buy your first house, it's scary.
I know. And and here's the thing too.
Having
Grace was a
expenses.
theater education major. She was the first theater ed graduate in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
And so there were not a lot of jobs for the arts.
Yes.
So I knew I had to like get a real job, and
Yes.
she had to get a real living because they were not hiring theater teachers here.
Of
So
course.
she got on with a local university here, Columbia Southern University, and it was a very entry level position. Basically, she was a tutor. But like my wife is like such a badass. I tell people all the time, like she is such a hard worker, and she literally worked from like the very bottom position
Yes.
to one of the top positions in
That's
that
awesome.
firm, because she has a good attitude, she has a good work ethic, she'll do what it takes to get the job done.
Yes.
So before she got into the public school system, instructional design position,
Yeah.
which she's a theater ed, but everybody wants to be an instructional designer this year. I mean, in this time frame,
Yes.
because you get to work from home, you have a lot of
Yeah, that's
flexibility.
true.
It's a high paid job, So she worked her way all the way up the ladder. I was working through real estate, working myself, trying to, make a name and separate myself from my dad.
Of course, because that's very hard too.
It's hard.
Because his dad is Tom Stanton, and he's Tommy Stanton.
Yes.
So you have to brand yourself.
Yeah,
but
and it was
obviously, you're
hard.
always going to be attached. Everyone's always going to say, oh, you came
Yeah.
from a dad who already had success in the game.
But he has such a big, outgoing, like overbearing personality,
Yeah.
like larger than life personality.
His dad really does.
Where I'm a little more reserved.
Yeah.
I have a larger than life personality, but it's if I warm up to you and know you.
It's true.
And so I struggled for probably the first couple of years because I felt like I was like in his shadows and I couldn't make a
course.
name for myself. And I was very self-aware. Like I felt like people were thinking he was giving me things or like giving me business and he wasn't. I mean,
course.
that's,
Yeah.
I was having to do my own work because he
Yeah.
had bills to pay too and things to do,
Of course.
So
you were still like a agent like everyone else.
yeah, and it was hard.
I know.
Because I didn't quite understand, I was his assistant and I was in his office. And then I was kind of like selling on my own too, but also helping with the foreclosure still when I got my license.
Yes.
And people would literally walk in and be like, "Hey, Tom, I got $1 million house I want to sell on this," or "Hey, I've got this $500,000 lot I want to sell, and I'll do a 10% commission." Like whatever it was. And I'd be like, "Oh my god!" And he's like, "This is because I've built my name."
Exactly.
And so
he put in the work.
Yeah, for being brand new, I feel like a lot of times agents when they first get in the game, they think they have to be number one. And you have to put in the time and build the credibility and
Absolutely.
do the work.
100%.
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, some people it does because they may have connections or whatever. It's very rare.
Very rare. And it takes like a year of consistency. That's what I tell my agents. Like 1 year consistency, it stinks because all these agents that got into it the past 2 years, they were spoiled.
Yeah.
That's not real estate. Now, it's real
This is
estate.
real
It
estate.
is back to the basics.
If you could write a contract, you were fine.
If you got to make phone calls, you got to, there's
They're
a
like,
million
what do I do?
things
What do
you
I
need
do?
to
What do I do?
And it's not easy.
No, it's hard work. And we have a lot more agents in our area now. Like when I
Absolutely.
first started, I think back, my dad was the president of our association in 2005, I think. And he had 450 or 500
Crazy.
agents. And by the time I was the president in 2022, we had 3,200 or 3,400.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's grown a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
we still get new agents all the time. But your parents were never like, don't do real estate.
No. I think my parents probably always knew I was going to be.
Because your personality, you have like an outgoing personality.
Like my brothers and sisters were very like book smart,
Yes.
intellectual, and I was more like street smarts, like
Yeah.
like
I get it.
hustling or like even from I always tell the story. My sister probably hates it, but like when my sister was a senior in high school, I think it was our pastor's daughter. Somebody got married in our church, and there was only one limousine company in town. And his wife, they owned the limousine company. She was the assistant principal at Foley High School, and my sister never did anything wrong. She was perfect and did, well, finally her friends were like, please come on. Like they were like rolling yards. They're like, come on, please. It'll be fun. Like, so she finally said, okay, I'll do it, So they went and rolled houses and they rolled that assistant principal's house. That was like a sign of like, we like you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She did not take it that way at all. She was freaking pissed. Like this assistant principal, she was ready to like make heads roll that someone rolled her yard, right? So they were all like freaking out. Well, he was driving these people around, and so the reception was at this house, and it actually was like across the street from where these people lived. The limousine driver, but he was waiting out front with the limo, and I was walked out, and I was like talking to him and chit chatting, and I was like, "Can I get in the limo?" And he's like, "No, it's reserved." It's like, "How about a ride?" And he was like, no. I was like, okay, well, if I had information on who rolled your house, could I have a ride in the limousine? And he was like, well, I'm interested. And I said, okay, well, give me a ride in the limo and I'll tell you who rolled your house.
This sounds like you.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Because whenever he calls, it's like, ooh, what is it going to be? Gossip? What does he know? What just happened?
So I got a free limo ride.
For ratting out your sister?
For ratting out my sister and her friends. And they all hated me.
I would too.
Oh, because I got in trouble.
Blood is thicker than water.
I know, sometimes,
Not that day. Limo
Not
ride
that
was
day.
more.
Limo ride, yeah. I was on cloud 9. So anyway.
That is too funny. So you got real estate, then you started producing, and then you started having kids.
Yeah.
I think looking back, would you have done things differently? Do you think you would have pursued more of the theater, the acting, the
I think there's always like a what if I had just not been scared. I think it was kind of a sense of, it was some fear that was holding me back.
Absolutely.
Even though it wasn't ever, I always do things, and I don't live my life in fear, but I think there was like some insecurities or something was holding me back from going to New York City.
Of course, it's freaking scary.
I know.
That's
it's a big
jump.
old from Alabama.
But do you still think about it and get...
Sometimes, but I feel like this was the right path. It all aligned for a reason. Like even Grace and I meeting, my wife is not like really a sorority girl, but she joined a sorority. She did the whole rush and all that. And so my sister was her pledge ed. They all had like a house mom for the freshmen that would kind of mentor them and tell them about sorority and kind of make sure they're doing good in class and all that. So my sister was the pledge ed that year.
Okay.
And so she introduced us, Grace and I. So she loves to say that. So it was kind of like full circle. So
that
it all
is
happened
so
for a reason. Yeah.
And then new agents. Is there any advice you would give new agents in the game with all your years experience? Because now you've been doing it, 13 years?
Yeah. 14, this is 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah. So I guess the biggest thing I would tell new agents is like slow down, number one. Like Rome was not built in a day.
My mom always tells me that.
Yeah.
Always tells me that.
You're just going to burn yourself out.
It's
you cannot be
true.
available to everyone all the time.
I agree.
And if you really look at like the successful agents in our county, even just in our county, they're not 24/7.
No.
They have a team around them that's helping them. They have built systems
and tools and people in place.
And it's all about systems and delegating.
I agree.
And time management.
I agree.
And which I struggle with all three. I'm not perfect. I struggle with all three. I have a hard time delegating.
It's hard for a lot of people. To put a time block. I'm going to do this, and then a client calls.
Absolutely.
No, you coordinate the client around what you were going to do. The
number one thing I would say though is answer your phone.
I know.
It's a privilege that your phone rings.
Communication.
Yeah, it's communication.
Communication is really key in the industry.
It's like if you think, oh, this is going to be such a bad conversation with this person, and you tread on it, and you fret, and then you have a conversation with that person, it was easy. You know what I mean?
True.
So it's like kind of like try to get that done first.
It's so true.
But like answer your phone, even no matter what, because you never know who's going to be on the other side of that phone.
It's absolutely so true.
And it could be nothing to start with, but you have to build your name, you have to build your brand, you have to let people know that you know what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And now in this new year, 2024 coming up, like what are your goals, or what are you wanting to accomplish, or just do better in your real estate business?
Yeah. So I don't usually like set New Year's resolutions, but because I always just end up not doing them.
Of course.
But I opened a new brokerage last year, so I'm really focused on getting the right people in this brokerage that are a good fit, and a good fit with me, because I'm not a coddler. I'm not going to hold your hand.
Absolutely.
I really want to see people succeed, and I love seeing people succeed. Like my goal is that you're going to outsell me or do better than me
all day long.
Like I love that
all day long.
And if anyone says anything else, they're
I know
100% wrong, because like that brings me more joy to see someone really making it and doing great.
Absolutely.
And because they've done the work and they've done what I've said, and they've it's like planting a seed, like You have to prepare the ground. You have to plant the seed. You got to water the plant. It doesn't grow overnight. You've got to keep nurturing it, watering it, picking the weeds around it, and then finally it starts to happen, and it takes a little time. But I would say my number one goal is to get this office
build more agents within your agents.
Because I didn't bring any over from the other office.
Of course, you started from ground zero.
Yeah. And so we're starting to get some momentum and get some.
And that's now the time of the year. And then you also have your mom who helps with the school. That's a tremendous benefit.
She's a great educator and a great asset for that, and helps. I did some training. I'm like getting into it because I never really, I took that for granted because when I was in the other office, my dad and my mom would do that.
You got to now build your own schedule for the monthly trainings. How are you going to get the morale up? How are you going to coordinate everything?
That's right. Yeah.
I get it.
And then my other big thing we discussed earlier is like, I'm just not giving away all of my energy like so freely like I used to. Like if my kids don't want to wear what I have laid out for them, I'm going to let them pick what they want.
They don't want to match, I know.
If they don't want to match or if they don't want to look like it looks good.
I know.
It's their own style, whatever. I'm just letting go. Really,
I know.
I can't I can't control everyone is really what it is. I can only control me.
This is so true.
And that's a hard lesson because I'm a control freak and I like to control things and situations and, so I'm really just kind of stepping back.
A-type personality over here.
Yeah, totally. And I tell people, like, I really strongly believe in the DISC personality.
Yes.
And it's interesting to me. I studied it.
I agree.
And I'm a high D. I'm like 97% D. I'm like a high I. It's like up there in the 90s as well. My C is like probably 50%, 40%, and that's not super strong. My S is 0, and I'm not kidding. It's literally 0. Yeah. And I just am not designed. I'm not a lovey-dovey, huggy-feely person, but, it's interesting, like when you're talking personalities and everyone's different personalities, when you're at work, you have to know how to turn that on and off.
Absolutely. You have to adapt.
And for someone who's a lovey-dovey person, I have to...
I know. And
figure out a way to give them some lovey-dovey.
It's hard. It's a chameleon personality where you can just...
And it's not being fake. It's just adapting
learning how to communicate which works for them. So I think that is a hard aspect about being a broker. And it's exhausting part about being a broker.
Because you have like 50 kids that all have different personalities. 50 kids
with different personalities, different needs,
different wants.
And it's exhausting. Yeah. I mean, it's very time consuming. So anything personal that you want to achieve this year for yourself outside of business?
So my wife and I have not ever taken a trip away from our kids. So that's one thing is that we're going to try to reconnect. And you got to
start doing that every year.
Yeah, we're going to start reconnecting. We always take like a family trip.
Yes.
And we always go to a family camp every summer. Yes. But like we never have just been. And our son is finally at the age where we feel comfortable. Like
absolutely.
He can be with them for a couple nights. So that's our first thing. We're taking our first trip in February. So
that'll be nice to reconnect.
Yeah.
Not just kind of recenter. Kids and just
because we're both. I mean, being honest, like my wife and I, if we didn't have children, we are both 100% workaholics. Like we love to work.
That's me and John.
And I don't want to say like that's my identity. That's where I'm at. But like I enjoy working.
Yes.
Like I don't even know how to explain that. I get energized from it.
I get it.
It's kind of like at a party. Like my wife at a party, and we're opposite. Like I'm a high D. She's a SC blend. Right.
Yes.
And so like at a party, she loves to go and find like some person and like sit in the corner and have a beer and like have like deep conversations where I'm like, like for the party, running around, working the room, and I get energized from that.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing like later in my life, I don't really want to go to those social events anymore.
It's so draining.
But I want to fucking be invited, okay? I want to have the option to say no.
I don't care about any of that kind
of stuff. Invite me, but I'm not going to come. You know what I mean?
Like the mystery, where is Tommy doing? You're like, I'm home on my couch eating ice cream.
Totally. I'm not there, but I want to be invited. So, because I have FOMO. I have serious FOMO.
Yeah, and I just don't care.
My wife doesn't care. She could care less.
I could care less about any of that.
I'm like, what's everybody doing?
I don't want to talk to anyone after hours.
And then I'm like, oh, y'all are doing that? Okay, great. I'm not going to go.
No desire to have conversations outside of working hours. I like to be quiet on my couch home with my kids.
I know. And like I have this group that I graduated with. There's like, I don't know how many of us, maybe 6 or 7 of us. And we call ourselves the Dinner Club. And we have this text group. And it started out years ago because we weren't connecting.
Yes.
And we're all here. We're all still good friends. So we would like go to like have a party or dinner or whatever,
That's
But
nice.
even that, I'm like... I just
see that I would enjoy.
Get me off a group text.
I would enjoy
don't want to be on a group text.
Like connecting with my high school friends. Like I enjoy that still, but
it's a lot of fun.
Here
and
it's
it's like, and it's funny because I went to Gulf Shore. I went to a bunch of schools growing up because my parents they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was just extremely ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I went to Gulf Shores, and then I went to Catholic school, and then I went back to public school. And then my mother was the assistant principal when I was in high school, and she took a leave of absence at the end of my sophomore year. And so I still lived in Gulf Shores, but I was like, I think I'm going to go to Foley. So I like transferred to Foley High School, where it was like we had 500 students total in Gulf Shores, and I had 500 students in my class. And it was like night and day. And also, like, there were not a lot of diversity. There was not a lot of diversity in Gulf Shores at that time. So I went to Foley, where there was a lot of diversity, and it was like culture shock.
It worked. And it worked better for you.
Oh yeah, I loved it. I had a great time. I didn't know everybody, so it was like fun, kind of flying under the radar, but I was still known, and I had a lot of friends.
Absolutely.
So
that's awesome.
I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know either, but we'll see. Let's see what 2024 brings.
Right.
Hopefully you can achieve your goals. You'll be on the trip with your wife in the next few weeks. And stay tuned for more Rachel and Tommy.
There you go.